about it. On the other hand, what they did instead was worse, because they didn't shrink the city at all in any centrally planned way, but they left places half alive and half not, and people kind of trapped in them in individualistic ways. I've been reading about what has been done in China. It's a very different society, and not one that we could replicate in many ways. But with the earthquake, because they have so much control over people, they basically are saying, this village is going right here. You're not going back to where you were, but everybody in this village is going here. Now, you may be very resentful about the loss of freedom of movement, but from a viewpoint of kind of what helps people to recover from this, the idea that everybody was in the same boat and moved to the same place, is a better approach. I think one thing that you could do with community kinds of things, taking it into account, was in fact partly what they did with taking people to Houston. In part, people got on buses in front of that convention center and they were just taken to wherever. So some lady we interviewed ended up in some rural place in Alabama, and they just got off the bus and they said, here you are, and people brought her some clothes, and she was the only person from New Orleans there, and she was alone, and she just stayed there for a couple of months. But at least the people who went to Houston went together, and they were put in apartment buildings kind of close to one another. That's more of what should be done. People should not be individually just put on planes and buses and sent in isolated ways.
Are there studies being done to monitor the emotional damage that has been caused because of how different the city is now, like culturally and economically and the diversity?
You know, there's a lot of studies that have been done about Hurricane Katrina, and but in fact, I think that you're exactly right. There should be longitudinal studies, and the issue is, like, except for our study that had people, you know, a sample and then follows them wherever they go, it's very difficult to do this kind of research because people disappear, right? They disappear into wherever they've gone and they kind of assimilate, and you don't know, are they doing better or worse? So there is our study, and there's a few other studies that are checking in with the same people over time, but probably not as much as there should be.
I just had a couple of questions. My first question was, what did you find most rewarding about your study and your research? And then my second question is, do you feel like your research was well worth it? And if, again, do you also feel like it makes a difference?
Right. Great questions. The questions were, what did I find most rewarding about my research, and do I feel like it made a difference? The thing I find most rewarding about the research is actually talking to people and documenting what happens to them over time. You know, there was so much attention to New Orleans after the hurricane, and then, you know, we went on to the next issue, right? And we forgot about these people, and then, you know, at the 5-year anniversary, there were some specials on TV, et cetera. But people are still coping day to day with some of these issues, and their kids are coping with them, et cetera. So I do feel like somebody should be documenting what's happening over time, and so I find that rewarding, that I've kept the spotlight on what's happening to these people when others, you know, when journalists have moved on. The other thing, whether or not it's made a difference, I don't know. Sometimes when you do research, you don't know whether it's made a difference for a very long time, because you're just doing the research and, you know, documenting things and publishing the articles, and you're hoping actually that it will have an effect on policy. I do know that the women that we've talked to have been very happy to talk to us, that we were a little worried about contacting them, that maybe they would feel like this was intrusive, and they had signed up for a community college study, and here we're doing a disaster study. But in fact, they were like, when are you going to come and interview us again? I want to talk about this. They really want to talk and process it. So in that way, doing the interviews is rewarding. Yes. Yes. The question is, the people were at Delgado Community College, And yes, the community college was flooded. We went down about 2 months after the hurricane, and the faculty were living in the FEMA trailers parked on the campus. There was one building that had the least amount of damage. They were closed for the fall semester. In January, they reopened with online courses and a few classrooms in one of the buildings. And they have very much increased their online offerings. They're back open now completely. And one of the things that we're monitoring over time is how many of these people actually get their degree and then go on and get their college degree. And many of them re-enrolled in the new places in which they settled. They're very committed to finishing their education.
If you were interviewing single answers instead of comments, how much of this was based on their children and families?
So really good question. How much of this is because we're interviewing women, and how would it be different if we were interviewing men? Some of it would probably be the same, but because they're mothers of young children, I think in part they're really, they can't get too depressed. Well, I mean, the ones who are really badly off can, but a lot of times they kind of pick themselves up faster because they have to do it for their kids. There have been some studies of men following disasters. Generally, women tend to have more symptoms after disasters than men, but whether that's because women are just more likely to talk about their feelings and admit them, I don't know. Yes?
Do you happen to know why the government decided to do so much individual basis for people coming back and deciding that it was just going to be on an individual basis and not open up full communities? Like, did they see a lot of benefits towards that?
Well, you know, there's a long story about that. The question is, why was the city planning that happened and the recovery so individualistic? There was a planning commission that was put together and had hearings, and you know, there was a lot of politics around this. Some communities like Lakeview came together, but they had a lot of resources. They were the richest neighborhood. They came together, they talked, they thought about how to kind of redevelop themselves, and they got a lot of outside support, and they really were able to recreate their neighborhoods. But we live in a society that's very individualistic and very market-driven. And in fact, the market is really what's driving the recovery in New Orleans. So if it's a neighborhood in which the rents are going back up, people can recover their investment, then they can sell and they can do what they want. But in a neighborhood where there's not demand for the houses and where you can't get insurance because it's under sea level, there's just a catch-22 where you can't walk away from your mortgage and you can't start over. And so there's a lot of difficulties to that. So a lot of people are kind of stuck in these neighborhoods in which, for instance, there's no grocery store. The grocery stores didn't reopen because it's market-driven. And so you know, there's a lot of, I think, failure of leadership to really make some hard choices about how you might recover differently.
Stop right here. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to thank Dr. Ross for a very memorable inaugural lecture. You set a platform for us now. Years ahead, and we're very good.
Thank you very much.
To us in terms of your scholarly life, your commitment to rigorous data collection and analysis. I know our students here will continue to pursue this conversation, and I know our students will continue to go to New Orleans and serve.
That's great.
So
That's great.
Proud of them. And I invite all of you now to join Dr. Waters, Hakim family, and the alums over in the Fenway room for a reception. And I know several of the students will be going to International Hospitality Night tonight, so please feel free to come to the building before you get to the conference center. Thank you very much.